Hi there, my name is Joe Reitz. I am a co-leader of the Seattle Marketo user group, affectionately known as SEAMUG. And in April 2023, we did a recap of the Adobe Summit and specifically focusing on announcements related to Marketo Engage and Marketo Measure, frequently known as Bizible. So we wanted to give all of our SEAMUG members a copy of the slides. We've had a few technical challenges with just being able to share them easily. So I'm recording a quick recap of the recap, if you will. So diving right in our meeting, we talked about primarily Marketo's roadmap for the next Marketo Engage and Marketo Measure for 2023. And we talked about some of the top sessions by attendance and just a very brief recap of the content that was covered. And what I would also encourage you is, and I said this to the SEAMUG members, was you are getting a recap from just one person's point of view. I would challenge you all to, if any of this piques your interest, Adobe has all of these sessions available for you to go in and watch, fast forward, just go to the bits you want. Some of them even let you download the slides themselves if you just want to get a very quick synopsis. But there's some very good, useful content coming out of Adobe Summit this year. And we're going to end the presentation on some resources, and which is basically just those links, which won't help you because this is a video recording. But I'll put them in the description of this video. And obviously this is a recording, so we can't have a two-way dialogue, but please feel free to put your comments in the comments, and great to drive some dialogue. So first things first, Marketo, Adobe really reviewed what they've done in the last year. And the three big innovations were executable campaigns, web services as flow steps, and also something I didn't know about was new templates for both Tableau and Power BI as far as Marketo Measure, aka Bizible, is concerned. And if you don't know what an executable campaign is, it's very similar to a request campaign function, except one of the key differences is with executables, the executable job has to completely finish before it will call the next flow step. So if you have one sort of controller smart campaign and it has 4 or 5 executables in it, executable 1 has to finish before it moves on to flow step 2 and finishes that executable campaign. So really the main benefit is that helps prevent race conditions when you're applying changes to your data or anything else in the marketing automation suite. And web services as flow steps is really cool. Things that Marketo was developed in like 2007, when it first came out, and a lot has changed and a lot of features have been added, but there's also a lot of bespoke things that don't fit every single customer need. But if you have the engineering know-how, you can make them work. And that's basically what web services as flow steps are. Is you can have a flow step in Marketo that calls a web service and then does whatever the thing needs to do, whether that's changing data or whatever else, and then sends all that information back into Marketo. And what's cool about these is when you do that flow step, it waits for the response back from the web service before it moves on to the next flow step. So similar to executables, we're trying to prevent race conditions and do a lot of cool stuff. And with the new templates for Tableau and Power BI, specifically around Marketo Measure, these are very basic things that for newer implementations, or even if you just don't have a lot of great visualizations for your data, just gives you some of the basics around like what channels are performing, how they're contributing to pipeline, what attribution is looking like based on the model that you're using. Just really good foundational stuff coming from Adobe. But moving into this year, they broke things out into 3 key themes, and those were scaling marketing teams, reimagining marketing and sales partnerships, and maximizing revenue impact for your organization. And there's a few bullets for each of these and a few slides for each one. And the first thing under scaling your marketing organization was building journeys in Marketo Engage. And it's not really a new functionality per se, and like we're not talking about a new way to do nurtures or anything like that. But what it really is like a lot of other marketing automation suites have. I think Eloqua's had this for a while. Is a more visualized flow. So when you have, I see two really great use cases for this. Is when you have junior or inexperienced Marketo users or infrequent Marketo users, it helps them understand what the sequence of events is a little more visually, because everybody learns different and thinks different. And a lot of us that have been using Marketo for a long time have gotten very used to the filters, advanced filter logic, and how you just stack everything and it makes logical sense. But this is a great way for the less experienced Marketo users to really understand what is happening when and how that all maps out. The other useful benefit of what Journeys is in having this visual representation of a flow is for your own documentation purposes. So happens very frequently. Like, documentation is one of those things that's very hard for all marketing and marketing ops teams to keep up with. But this is a great way for us to not have to go into Visio or whatever solution you use, OmniGraffle, etc., to build something custom, because you can just get it straight from the system. And this is going to be hitting Marketo customers in the second half of this year. So it's not available quite yet, but it is coming. Next, under scaling marketing teams was so since
detected at the front door.
Delivered person, but since Adobe and Workfront are all under the same umbrella, what they've done is essentially, with the project management tool of Workfront, you can and this is available now, essentially cut a ticket and have that clone a campaign and really automate a big chunk of the campaign construction experience. So the idea is, if you have a brief, a campaign brief that has all the details of what your emails may need, anybody could fill out this, what amounts to a form, and clone the campaign, have everything really ready for final review and QA. And I would estimate this probably automates 80% of the work, 85 maybe. And there's, if you don't use Workfront, there are ways to use the API to do the same thing today. It does require a little bit of technical expertise on your part or your team's part, but this is a great thing to see, because you can sort of see how work in marketing ops and how we work on the business sort of being thought of in a very scalable way. So I'm really excited to see teams not just adopt this with Workfront, but do it with other things like Asana or Monday or whatever you use. If there's an API you can leverage, you can essentially build the same thing. And another really cool feature I'm looking forward to is interactive webinars in Marketo Engage. So actually this week I was chatting with someone in the marketing ops community about just the perils and difficulties sometimes with some webinar providers like Zoom and Marketo, like sometimes having some unclear documentation, or one platform makes a change and it makes things hard to troubleshoot and diagnose. What Marketo is actually doing is bringing in their own native webinar solution. So there's no integrations. Everything happens directly within Marketo. So if you're a Splash user or a Zoom user or whatever, and you've kind of just grown accustomed to the latency of, okay, well, it's got to go from the webinar system back to my marketing automation system, then back to the CRM system, we can take out a lot of that processing lag by all of it just happening natively in Marketo. So this is going to be coming in the first half of this year, so relatively soon. I'm really excited to demo this and see kind of like, is this something that can create better experiences for our customers? Because I think it will. And then also less headaches for us operators out there for how we make things work and how we build things. There's also dynamic chat is not new, chat is not new in Marketo, but dynamic chat is. And I suspect this is going to be a somewhat ubiquitous feature across all chatbot providers. But what Adobe was essentially touching on was they're bringing in Adobe Sensei and generative AI to their chatbot capabilities. So if you're a longtime Drift user, or really any chatbot user, you're accustomed to creating very specific experiences where the generative AI will help in the future, and as it gets better and better, is making it more of a directional thing. So you don't have to be so hyper specific. If someone asks a off the wall question, the chatbot will have some level of guidance that is a decent proxy for being in touch with a human. So really excited to see how this feature and functionality develops, and not in Marketo's product, as well as just the competition that will drive in the marketplace that benefits all of us. And then moving into the second category, Adobe talked a lot about account list segmentation and activation. So this was sort of like an ability to have like to create new records and accounts based on whatever unified data in your CDP. So lots of cool things. This is coming in the second half. It was still fairly high level in the presentation, but I would recommend you go watch the roadmap session and dig into this, because this is one of those areas where it's not talked about so much all the time, at least in my circles, but I think it will become something that we all it will be the next big buzzy thing of just how we can land and expand. And then they also talked about coming to Marketo Measure, aka Bizible, the Ultimate Edition, which is essentially adding some AI and ML capabilities to how you define your models. So for Bizible users, you may recall there's attribution models that are available out of the box, like W-shaped, U-shaped, full path, etc. But you also have the ability to make a custom model. And what the AI here is going to do is basically recommend like how you should weight the various touch points in your own model, which is really great for helping marketers and businesses understand what are the things we need to do more of and less of. And that's really the whole point of attribution in the first place. So excited to see this, and this is available now. So if you have an interest in that, or if you're just kicking the tires on Bizible, definitely get pricing for the and dig a little deeper on the capabilities of the Ultimate Edition, because it sounds pretty cool. There was, when I was implementing Bizible last year at my company, one of the things we were talking about was, I wonder if there's a way we could do this exact thing. So very exciting to see the product team sort of reading at least my mind and developing something like this. And then we got into some of the sessions. So the first session was about, it was a very clever title, The Buyer Journey, Breaking Bad Lead Management Processes. And it talked about, this is a joint session with some folks from PwC and US Bank, where they talked about a new approach to lead management. It was a good session. I encourage you to watch it. I would really challenge new. This is sort of a pretty standard thing that I've seen in a lot of businesses, but what it amounted to was they had a traditional model like many of us do, where it's the serious decisions waterfall, MQL, SAL, SQL, etc. What they expanded to, I'm very oversimplifying right now, but what they essentially did was they wanted to have a very keep the system they had in terms of like, there's a very clear path for what marketing thinks is qualified, but then there's also some things that they wanted to just send sales because they had the bandwidth to follow up. And this is going to be one of those very debatable topics, very situational, based on your organization, of is that a good idea or not. In smaller orgs where maybe your SDR or BDR teams are paid hourly, the having a fast track system where some records are treated as if they're MQLs, even though they're not. And these would be things like content downloads or webinar attendance, do one thing and then get routed to sales, not as the MQL necessarily, but a different classification. And those can be effective. What I would encourage anybody to do if you go down this road is make sure, as you're building this system, that you have a way of tracking and measuring and showing what the effects on conversion rates are. Like, do these leads we pass to sales or follow up, do they actually end up in opportunities with pipeline? Does it make a difference to the business? Is it a lot of wasted time? Your mileage will vary. I can tell you my personal experience has been, it does create a lot of chaff when you send a lot of not necessarily ready to buy signals to sales, especially if your business development teams are smaller and more focused on just qualifying like real opportunities. It adds a little bit of shuffle to their plate. And in my experience, what it did was it about doubled the velocity for score-based records reaching SQL. Score-based MQLs reaching MQL. It was like 20 days versus 10 for like demo requests, for example. But like I said, this is going to be very dependent on your organization. This is a very common motion, I think, for larger companies to have this sort of setup. But watch the session. Write in the comments what you think. I think there's a lot, as we were discussing this in the SEAMUG meeting, there's a lot of really rich conversation around this where, and this is probably good advice everywhere, of like, I can give you my opinion, man, but at the end of the day, it's just my opinion. So we gotta, in all of our jobs, all of our roles everywhere, it's always about, hey, let's make a call, but like, let's get the data and try to see, like, does it make sense for us? And the for us is probably the most important part of that sentence. So give it a listen and let me know what you think. The next session really touched my soul. I was a very small child when Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade came out, and just walking right past the questionable parenting decisions that let me break several VHSs in watching and rewatching and overwatching that movie. There was a lot of really cool metaphors about how marketing attribution is sort of the holy grail for marketing. And I'll just touch on a few of these. This is one that this was straight up entertainment. So I would almost download it and put it on for your morning commute, or just like while you're like making breakfast or whatever in the morning. It's a really good, thought-provoking session, and there were some good insights coming out of it. They talked a little bit about the advanced modeling coming to Bizible, and how just how it all works. But they got into like, how do you link that Last Crusade metaphor to attribution? And they talked about it like it being the Holy Grail, obviously, and that starting this journey is like Sean Connery's Grail diary. In if you haven't seen this movie, your homework is watch this movie, then watch this session, because it's a fantastic film. But there are challenges and pitfalls and diversions and traps all throughout the way, and attribution is not an easy topic to talk about. Everybody's got a point of view. Some of the jargon gets very divisive. Like you can go down a whole big rabbit hole when you talk about, like, is this attributed to this, or is it sourced by this, or how does that work? And lots of really good discussion and thinking around how all that comes together for attribution. But at the end of the day, what we want to use it for is to know what to do more of and less of. So it becomes less about that jargon and more about how do we get to that point of knowing what's working, what's not, and how do we optimize our strategies to reflect that. So the idea that went further was there are trials in this journey, and the first trial is the trial of bias, that any human-made system is going to have some level of bias in it. And there was a very broad point here that when you let the machine sort of decide for you, you can take that bias away and design something that is a little more maybe reflective of reality. And the second trial was a trial of taxonomy, which was finding the right stones to set your path. And this is sort of like, how are you tagging things? How are you labeling things? How do you inform the system how you attribute different things? And there's a whole that in and of itself could be a whole just recurring weekly session of just how to dial in your attribution system. And then the third was, once you do all that, like, is it accurate? Can we trust that what this is right? And attribution, no matter how you set it, is going to require some leap of faith. And I think that's something we don't talk about often enough in terms of marketing attribution. So and one point that I'd also add there is, like, it's directional. All attribution is directional. There's going to be times where something gets flagged to other, or there's some kind of hiccup. The salesperson did something weird, or something skipped a life cycle stage, so it got flagged to a different channel. Lots of things like that can happen. So it's more about, like, accepting the fact that, is this 100% accurate? No. Is it good enough for us to make actionable decisions? Absolutely. So it was really good to see that sort of idea fleshed out a little more in this session. So again, you should watch the whole thing and not listen to me anymore. But when they talked about all that accuracy being delivered and having the right weights assigned, what that enables, and that was associating the exact amount of value to a touch point, like an amount of pipeline, an aggregate or revenue, and aggregating any touch point at different levels, even the ones we didn't model on necessarily. And they talked about like how Workday did this, and there's a lot more I'm not going to say, right, so I'm just not going to touch on it. But there were some really good insights kind of along what I was just saying of like, it is accurate enough, and how that helps us build the right views for more focused reporting and actionable decisions. And then there was they sort of clinched this with the hidden trial of selectivity. So this is if you remember the end of the last Crusade, spoilers for those of you that haven't seen it somehow. But there's the knight from the Crusades that is guarding all of the chalices, one of them being the cup of Christ. And the famous line, "Choose wisely." And we of course know the villain chose poorly and then became a desiccated husk. But choosing wisely, what does that mean? It means what are you attributing things to? Is it conversions? Is it sales volume and sales revenue, like pipeline revenue? Is it customer lifetime value? There's a lot of things we could bubble up to, and it'll vary a little bit based on your business and goals and priorities. But the important point here was clarity and focus are table stakes. Like, they're absolutely paramount to being able to do this right. Otherwise, you'll end up with choosing poorly. And I'm not going to say you're going to become a desiccated husk, although in my heart of hearts, sometimes I feel like a desiccated husk. But it's not going to be conducive to success. The attribution model might not be the right model that you're using, or leads your stakeholders in the wrong direction. And one example of this I can clearly say is I see this happen in a lot of companies where last touch is simple, so folks tend to adopt it as like an easy, like, hey, it's the simplest one. We know all attribution models are flawed, so let's just pick one and go. But where it gets a little bit difficult is if you use a last touch model and then people get in the motion of saying, well, what did this campaign drive? Like, we know as humans that that's not really how things work. Like, if you architect out every opportunity and look at all the touch points that occur, it's almost never just one, right? So if you're this goes down to the point where, depending on what you're trying to show, like, is marketing driving new opportunities, and what are the things marketing's doing from a channel and campaign perspective that's doing that, where the last touch model might not be it. You might want to use a more W-shaped model where we give more weight to all the things that happen before an opportunity, or and even customize those weightings so that we can kind of say, like, well, we don't think this is worth that much credit. But at the end of the day, again, debating about credit and like core attribution is a lot different than talking about like sourced versus influenced. So it's going to really depend on what level of sophistication and maturity you have in your business, and how much people are aligned around that idea of, some of this is directional, some of it is like just hard science of what we're seeing. But like, it's understanding when and how the data can be imperfect, but also understanding where and how it's perfect enough. I really love that session, if it wasn't obvious. And then the last one was, I don't really have much slides on this one, but there was a session about just another one about attribution. So attribution was a very hot topic this year, as you can imagine. And this was basically a really great primer on how to set up and reconfigure your Marketo measure instance for your needs. And so whether you're a new customer or existing, this was a session that was one of the more useful ones, I think, in terms of if you have something you need to do and you need to or you just want to challenge your thinking and be a little vocally self-critical. This is a great one to watch and kind of get some of those learnings around, like, how are other people doing it, and what do the experts recommend. The person that presented this session is one of the at least from what I've seen, one of the more experienced and vocal Marketo measure customers, and really knows her stuff. So I would encourage you to watch Kimberly's session here, and say thanks on LinkedIn, because she did a really great job. But that was essentially it. And the other 3 sessions, we covered the first 3 here. Also, shout out to Adobe Firefly that made this 5 for me with feathers, because I don't know what I was thinking, but feathers sounded right. Maybe the old Adobe CS2 days. But the other two sessions that were in the top 5 were account-based marketing, more than a B2B marketing strategy, and then of course the roadmap session. So we talked about the roadmap session a little bit, or at least the high notes. All of these links I'm going to put into the description of this video. But let me know what you think in the comments. Like what was useful for you if you were at Adobe Summit. Full disclosure, we were not, my co-lead and I were not at Adobe Summit, so we spent a significant amount of time watching some of the recap, or really the recordings, and recapping all of this for you. But can't emphasize enough, there's so much good content there. It's really useful if you want to log in, set up your account, whatever. These are all available, they're free. There's a lot of good thought leadership content in there. There's a lot of just really good thought-provoking stuff, and I would challenge you, don't accept any of it as just this is the way it is. Think hard on, like, does this apply to my business? Does this work for what we're doing, and where we want to go and how we want to measure things? And there's going to be elements that you probably take, and there's going to be some elements that you probably don't, and that's the nature of all these conferences, but and just the world in general. But hope this was useful for you. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to hit me up. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed.